I always forget.
It's upside
Okay,
down.
well, welcome everybody. And let me jump in here with the solar news to begin with. Okay, this week in solar news, there you are. First Solar's announced that they're going to build a fourth plant. Currently, they have 2 operational plants in Ohio, up in Perrysburg and Lake Township. They're in the process of building a third one up in Lake Township. And now they're saying they're going to build a fourth plant somewhere in southeastern United States. They haven't really said where, but this is all in response to the Inflation Reduction Act, which is trying to promote domestically manufactured products. And they're anticipating that this will add about 850 new jobs to their fleet, and they currently employ about 3,000. So I believe First Solar is the largest solar manufacturing facility company in the United States. Pretty sure about that. They do thin film panels, which are focused on the utility scale marketplace. So those of you who do solar residential installations may not be that familiar with their products. They also operate a recycling program. That's part of it. They're talking about like a closed loop production cycle where they can generate the product, but also recycle it when it comes to the end of its life. I've always heard that referred to as like cradle to cradle concept.
Cradle to grave.
Well, cradle to cradle, where you take the parts and then use them again the next time through. And then they also have facilities in, surprise, surprise, Vietnam and Malaysia. So if we could only put in, what is the other one? Burma and I'm losing sight of it. Is it? It might be Cambodia. I lose the 4 countries that have caused us problems there as far as manufacturing. Okay, speaking of that, the Commerce Department has announced they were supposed to announce their preliminary finding on the anti-dumping provision that was started up in response to a complaint filed by Oxen Solar, which basically said, we think that these 4 countries are actually producing Chinese panels. They just moved the production facility to the 4 Southeast Asian countries, which of course everybody in the industry said, duh, you think, you know, it's like sort of the most open secret in the universe. So then the Biden administration said, well, we got to look into this, which apparently they have to do by law. Which meant that they could impose tariff violations for anti-dumping on these panels from those 4 countries, which represented 80% of the panels used in the US, which would have been as much as 250% tariff penalties. So immediately back in the spring of this year, solar supplies dried up like in a week because everybody said, well, I'm not going to pay an extra whatever it might be, $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 in penalties. So we're not going to order it, but that was the supply chain for 80% of all the panels. So it caused a big problem. Then in response to that, Biden administration issued an executive order that said, okay, guys, while we're investigating this, we're going to put a 2-year hold on any tariff penalties, and they will not be applied retroactively. So even if we find that there's a problem, you don't have to pay the penalty, which then opened up supply chains again. And then part of this domestic production that's included in the Inflation Reduction Act is in response to the fact that everybody is now becoming keenly aware that relying on foreign countries for critical supplies is maybe a mistake. It's always nice that the politicians come around to these decisions sometime around 10 years after the rest of us have figured that out. But anyway, so that's all happening. Oxen, I think is pronounced, requested a delay on this preliminary finding. So that preliminary finding has been pushed to April September for the preliminary, which pushes the final finding into April or June of next year. I'm not really sure what's behind this delay. Oxen took a lot of heat for filing this. They may be coming back saying, guys, we're going to play nice since the problem is basically with the domestic thing taking care of itself. So maybe we'll just play this out until it becomes a moot point. You know, we'll see. We'll see how that works. But or they might just, you know, their lawyer must have said, maybe said, I'm too busy to respond right now. Who knows? I'm reading stuff into it. Speaking of reading stuff into it, California has announced that they will ban all new gasoline-powered cars by the year 2035. So by 2035, no new petroleum-based automobiles will be allowed, I guess, to be purchased within the state of California. I can't imagine they're not going to let you cross the border, but that's going to be the new thing. Well, that's a big deal. I mean, that is a big, hairy deal. California currently accounts for about 43% of all the electric vehicles that are in the United States, or all the plug-in vehicles. That includes plug-in hybrids. If you want to see what kind of ramp up this is going to require, currently there are 14.2 million cars in California, registered in California. They have about 560,000 electric vehicles. So, you know, another 13, 14 million at least. They have a population of about, what, 40 million people, which makes it the 5th largest country in the world. So, you know, that's pretty good, our 5th largest economy anyway. Oh, and part of this bill requires that these cars get at least 150 miles to a charge and maintain 80% of that after 10 years. So they're trying to deal with range anxiety there. One big concern is this, in part, along with the electrification of everything. The grid in California is expected to see a 68% increase in demand by 2045. And the grid in California can't deal with the demand of today. So how are we going to deal with basically a 68%? And my guess is that's probably a conservative estimate, because we're really and as electricity gets cheaper, people use more of it, you know, they waste it, they use it. And as we electrify the vehicles, we electrify heating, cooling, everything. It's going to be interesting. There was a new report that said over 25% of the US's electricity came from renewables in the first half of this year. That's a significant milestone. That represents an 18% increase over 2021, 18% over what we were using, not 18% aggregate. Wind grew by 25% to now represent 11.5% of the US's total electricity. Solar grew by 28% to now represent 5% of the total US grid electrical consumption. Hydro and some biofuels accounted for the balance of that. Coal, just in comparison, fell by 6%, now represents about 20% of the nation's grid. Nuclear, I almost said did a George Bush, nuclear or whatever, fell by 1%, now representing 18% of the nation's grid. And natural gas rose by 5% over last year, representing 36%. So if you're looking at it in total, natural gas, big gun, 36% of the electrical generation. Renewables now in second place with 25%. Then you get to coal 20, nuclear 18. And there's some rounding, but I added them all up and it turned out it was 99%. So I think the numbers are pretty good. So that's the news that I have from solar this week. Anybody have any comments or concerns or anything to add to that? Okey-doke. Hearing none. This is like Robert's rules. Yeah, Wally.
Hey, Jay. Hey, quick question. So do we foresee that California is going to transition to microgrids in order to handle this 65% increase in demand, do you think? Or
I think we're going to see that happening nationwide, you know, for a lot of different reasons, you know, again, it just makes sense. I think, as Tony pointed out last week, using energy where it's being produced just makes sense. And you get a lot more resiliency when you have a bigger system, right? So how do you combine those two things to where now you've got basically small pods of multiple facilities sharing a resource, you know, and who knows how that's going to evolve, but I think certainly it's going to granularize itself probably over several layers. You'll have individual resiliency at the facility level, group resiliency, grid-based resiliency. You know, perhaps we'll even see Texas join the rest of the country in some sort of, you know, sharing of a national grid. And who knows, they may actually survive next winter if they do so. It's not going to happen by then, but we'll pick on the Houston guys there. There's the rest of the country, and then there's Texas, right?
I know. I was just in Austin last week, so there you go.
Well,
right?
that's not Texas. That's not.
Well,
Texas,
that's what they call. So that's the People's Republic of Austin, as everybody outside of Austin refers to it as. So, Jay, thank you, though. I appreciate that, sir.
It's like that's like sticking Berkeley in Alabama. You know, it's
right.
just like, so. Yep, we have that around here in our part of the world as well. Ohio University, sort of a little bastion of blue in the middle of a sea of red. Okay, so nothing else on that? Let me jump into, and I'm sure this will prompt some discussions. I mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act. It's funny how we start referring to things as their buzzwords, because this kind of has nothing to do with inflation, but that's the way we shall refer to it. And so I wanted to drill down a little bit in it, because I think personally, looking at this is going to be absolutely huge for solar. It has far-reaching ramifications, and I just wanted to discuss that a little bit amongst ourselves. But then I'll hit what are the main things and the talking points. If you look at the White House, the government's site, creating clean jobs, that was one of the objectives. I'll get more on that here in a minute. Making the tax code fairer, we'll see, but there's a lot about that in here. Revitalizing American manufacturing. Okay, that's a little bit strong, but I think in the world of solar, maybe. And lowering healthcare costs. So taking these in reverse order, I don't want to spend too much time on the things that aren't solar related, but they're pretty big. The US currently pays about 2 to 3 times as much as other countries for prescription drugs. That's been an issue. Government will begin to be able to negotiate drug prices for the first time, which the rest of the sane world would say, why has that not been the case? But it has not been the case, largely because Big Pharma has about 1,600 lobbyists spending $300 million a year to make sure the prices are not negotiated, which, when I did the math, accounts about $500,000 per congressman and senator in lobbying costs each year. So that's a good gig. In fact, when they do the numbers, the Congressional Budget Office says that provision alone should save the government about, I wrote it down here, $288 billion just being able to negotiate pharmaceutical prices, which is pretty amazing. It'll cap out-of-pocket expenses on prescription drugs for Medicare recipients at $2,000 a year, and it continues the Obamacare premium supplementation for a number of years. Okay, it's when we get to taxes, 15% minimum tax on all corporations netting more than $1 billion a year. Again, that we'll see how that works out. They say that will generate about $313 billion. They're adding to a lot of money for IRS enforcement. which they anticipate will add about another 124 billion in uncollected taxes. And they're going to put a 1% tax on all stock repurchasing. That's something companies have been doing when they get record profits, they do stock buybacks. So they're putting a 1% excise tax on that. Now we get into the wonderful world of renewable. I think we've heard some of the big ones, but I want to get into some of the little guys, like the production tax credit. I mean, that's a little guy as far as residential is concerned, but it's a big guy when it comes to utility scale. And basically what this means, this applies to solar, wind, geothermal, hydro. This was coming to an end where they could claim 1.5 cents per kilowatt of generating capacity. And that was sort of a subsidy for producing green energy. It was a tax credit. It drops, it's extending to all projects constructed before January 1st, 2025. It drops to 0.3 cents per kilowatt, but jumps back up to 1.5 cents if you pay prevailing wage and construct using an apprenticeship program. So this is kind of a theme through this act. They're trying to promote union labor, union wages, apprenticeship programs. So most of these credits apply in full if the project is installed paying prevailing wage. So that's a big deal if you're in the union world. Let me see. And it can be increased by 10% if the components are mined, manufactured, and produced in the USA. So again, promoting union labor and promoting domestic supply chain. The investment tax credit, the ITC, this is the thing that comes into play. This was the 26% tax credit that then was going to be phased out next year to 22% and then gone for residential after that. This has now been extended for 10 years, so and elevated to 30%. So this is a big deal for residential solar especially, but well, for solar in general. In 2033, it drops to 26%, and then in 2034 drops to 22%. So really, it's a legitimate 10-year extension, and it applies retroactively. 30% does to the beginning of this year, the beginning of January 2022. I'm sure they did that because they didn't want to see people holding projects until January 1st. From the time that it was passed. So if you've had a customer that has installed a system this year, let them know they got a better deal than they thought they would get. It's now 30%.
So this is federal tax credit?
Yeah, this is the federal tax
federal
credit.
income tax?
Yes, this is the ITC. So it's a credit if you pay taxes. Now, if you don't pay taxes, because of low income, it's not going to apply. But if you are a nonprofit entity, it will apply. In fact, even though you don't pay taxes, you can receive it as a rebate. So this is huge, again, for solar, because always in the past, I've dealt with a lot of people who, like churches specifically, want to install on their facility, no tax credit, so they've often done power purchase agreements or whatever, lease options. Well, now they can install and they'll get a check back for the 30%. Also applies to electrical co-ops. It applies to municipal electrical systems. So that's going to be pushing through at the utility scale. Applies to governmental agencies. It applies to Indian tribes, pretty much any nonprofits, civic groups, things like that. So that is a refund, not a tax credit, and it is 30% for those people. This also applies, or it extends the tax credit to storage only facilities. So before, if you wanted to install solar on your home, and include batteries, that was okay. But now if you just want batteries, it will be okay, as long as the battery system is greater than 5 kilowatt hours. So that's, you know, a minimal size residential system.
So it's
There's-
retroactive back to January 1 of this year?
Yes. Well, I don't know about the refund rebate thing.
Yeah,
I'm not sure about that, but the tax credit, as a tax credit does go back to January 1st. But
okay.
yeah, you'll have to research that one. Yeah,
Yeah,
Bill,
yeah.
Bill, you're on mute there, Bill. There you
Yeah,
go.
you mentioned the size of the battery, 5 kilowatt. Did you really mean 5 kilowatt hours?
Yeah, that's what I meant. Did I say 5 kW? It's 5 kilowatt
I
hour.
think so.
Yeah, 5 kilowatt hours, which is a pretty small, although it's funny because I saw one manufacturer was bragging about they put it at 4.99 kilowatt hours because some cities were limiting to 20 kilowatts. And so they wanted people to be able to buy 4 of them and still be under that limitation. And now they've kind of messed themselves up a bit as far as tax credits, I think, if they're sticking with that. They'll probably just count it differently, you know, for tax purposes. That's the way school systems do. So, all right. Oh, the clean energy production tax credit. Now, this is something I'd not heard of, but basically it's like a regular production tax credit. If you as a generating facility do not take advantage of the production tax credit or the investment tax credit, you can get 1.5 cents per kilowatt hour production credit, essentially a subsidy. So if I think this applies mostly to utility scale systems. They may do the math and find out because the cost of installation is so cheap, they're better off getting 1.5 cents per kilowatt hour production credit as opposed to taking an investment tax credit up front. So that's a 10-year credit. So it's for the first 10 years of production. And again, it requires that you do things using prevailing wage. Yeah, Bill.
Yeah, so I am prototyping a system for someone. He spent $10,000 on 20 kWh and associated electronics to make power at a container that he, you know, takes his family out to for get away from it all. And I was wondering, do you have any comments about whether he could take the investment tax credit under those circumstances?
Well, I suspect a lot of it sounds like it would. The question is, did it happen? Does the retroactive part, if he did it in 2022, does that apply? I think it does. I think it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like it would. They did say that a lot of these, they were talking about controller units applying, like for microgrid controlling units, things like that. So I think they're taking the broadest possible determination as to what is a renewable energy system. So we'll, you know, but there's, you know, I don't want to say that that's for sure until you get your tax guy.
So what you would need is just the receipt, basically. You wouldn't actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I know when I took my tax credit on the installation, I mean, it's a self-reporting process when you're doing your taxes. If you get audited, you know, they're going to come back and verify these receipts or whatever, but it is just self-reporting. And you get the credit. So obviously if you're doing it yourself, you can't claim labor. So it's just whatever the out-of-pockets are. My argument or my thoughts with taxes are always it's to be, if I can with a straight face defend it, I'm happy to take that deduction and then apologize later, you know, if they claim. But if I feel justified, I mean, realistically justified, don't care that it appears on the front page of the New York Times kind of thing, you know, yeah, they may rule against you, but if you don't deduct it, then they've already ruled against you. So you're already done. There is clean hydrogen credits. And in consistence with my feeling about hydrogen, I don't care about those. So I'm not going to report them. Waste of time, waste of money, waste of paper. Okay, yeah, the tax credits for direct pay I had. Manufacturing production credits. So if you are a manufacturer, modules, 7 cents per watt tax credit on production of those. Cells, 4 cents per watt. Inverters, 6.5 cents a watt. Microinverters, 11 cents a watt. And batteries, $35 per kilowatt hour. These are really to promote, again, domestic manufacturing of product. My assumption is they're priced at a level that they think makes them competitive with imports. So we'll see. I don't know that they'll lead to a dramatic reduction in cost, but they may make American generated products competitive.
Jay, can you say that inverter number again, please?
Yeah, the inverters were 6.5 cents a watt and microinverters were 11 cents a watt.
That's for domestic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Then one that's raised a lot of discussion, the electric vehicle tax credit. So for the first time, you can get a $4,000 tax credit for used electric vehicle purchases. That's 2 years or older. So I guess you can't just walk off the lot, resell it and take the credit. $7,500 for new electric vehicles. These vehicles must be priced less than $55,000 for a sedan and $80,000 for SUVs or trucks. So I guess they're trying to avoid the high luxury market, don't get the credits. And similarly, if you have earned income of more than 150,000 for an individual or 300,000 for a couple, can't take the credits either. So now that all sounds well and good. The batteries must be US manufactured as well as the components, and the car must have final assembly within the United States. I read an article that said currently there are 72 electric vehicles available for purchase in the United States, and 0 would currently qualify for these credits. So that'll be interesting. Clearly, there's going to have to be a very rapid ramp up for domestic battery manufacturing for sure, and vehicle assembly here in the US. I'm surprised Tesla doesn't qualify. But I don't know, do they get their batteries elsewhere, not US manufactured? Tony, you might know, or is anybody
Yeah, I mean,
know?
they source them from all over the place. They've got, I mean, they pretty much have deals with every major supplier. The biggest one is CATL out of China. But they obviously they are building gigafactories here in the United States. The Tesla and Biden administration mashup is a whole separate conversation, I think.
Yes, I think Elon has not made many friends in this administration, but yeah, so this is interesting. And then I guess I would think, usually I can be pretty critical of Washington mindset, but if you're trying to spur a domestic manufacturing of automobiles and you're using tax policy to do it, that's probably a pretty fair way to go about it, especially at the onset of an industry that's going to come to dominate. So kind of hard to move a car manufacturing plant. It's not a decision you would make lightly. So, if you can build an industry, we'll see I wonder where the hub of this would be. Probably not Detroit, but be curious to see where the manufacturing hub of electric vehicles emerges.
I mean, right now it is Northeast Ohio and Southern Michigan, right? So you've got the Ultium plant, right, which will make the multi-billion-dollar joint mashup between General Motors and LG to make batteries for all their vehicles. And the same postage stamp in Lordstown, you've got what is now the Foxconn plant to manufacture Fisker electric vehicles and Lordstown Endurance pickup trucks. Ford put in a couple $2 billion right outside Cleveland for a battery manufacturing plant. Honda announced today or yesterday, or was leaked, they did not announce it, that they're gonna open up a $4 billion question mark facility around Dayton.
Yeah,
And there's another $1 billion outside of Detroit.
yeah.
So
Well,
maybe.
everybody's moving to Ohio, man. Intel's opening up the largest
Yes.
chip manufacturing just by Columbus,
Right.
and solar panels manufactured near Toledo. So, we're the heart of it all. What can
We've
I
got it
say?
all.
Yeah, Texas,
Hey,
You know,
Jay,
eat our
is
dust.
there, not to jump ahead, but is there anything, in this package around net metering?
No, that's really a state by state kind of
Is
thing.
it? Okay, I didn't
Yeah,
know.
that's not a federal tax policy issue. And in a lot of ways, we're stepping backwards when it comes to the world of net metering, especially if California rules as it appears it may rule. That may be I'm still convinced that will be a Pyrrhic victory for those companies that are pushing for this, because you take net metering out of the loop and you start really pushing microgrids and battery storage and competition on the grid and all these other things that are going to be transformational and sort of take the utility out of relevance. So I don't think they should be it'll short-term problem, long-term perhaps quite a incentive program for innovation.
Yeah, it pushes a zero-sum game. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, you're not gonna play with me? Okay, then we're gonna do this all off grids while prices of all of these things are dropping and while there's tax incentives to put them in even cheaper.
Yeah, it's a little bit like Russia cutting off gas supplies to Europe. And then Europe's going, "Yeah, okay, well, we'll have to come up with an alternative." Well, guess what? They're not going to go back to Russian gas, once they've developed that alternative. So short-term pain, but long-term changes. And I think to Tony's point there, we're kind of entering into an interesting time period because we know that solar is already the cheapest form of energy. And now it's on sale for like the next 10 years. So it's already the cheapest product and we're going to give you a 30% discount.
30% discount, right?
Wow, that's like amazing. I mean, we're in this sweet spot, so I think we're going to see supply chain issues for a long time, but largely because people are going to snap them up as fast as they become available. I don't know if manufacturing can keep up. And then, of course, people will overbuild and then there'll be a crash at the end of it and everybody will cry and whine and say, who could have ever seen this coming? And we'll sit here on our Solar Noon Tuesday and say, you know what? We saw this coming because we're smart.
But is it like an infomercial where somebody's fixing to say, but yet there's more?
Oh, yeah, it could be. I mean, yeah,
Taco
we're already
Bell.
seeing, we're in the middle of the building out of solar on building facilities.
Mhm.
But now we're superimposing the building out of the transportation system on solar. So we're kind of doubling down there at the same time. And so just as we said that the 68% increase in the California grid is going to be required, that's going to be duplicated all over the country. And then of course there's individual microgrids and there's individual facilities. So the building boom of solar is here at least for the next decade. I mean, we're probably kind of, when we look back 50 years from now, I suspect we'll look at this period similar to we look at the post-World War II build out of the interstate and the electrical grid and things like that happened over a decade that transformed the nation, and then we let it decay for the next 50 years. So we'll probably do that with solar. We'll build it out this decade and then sit around and watch it decay. So that's the American way. Woo.
Jay, I just dropped in the chat to back up with some of the things that you were saying. A friend of mine sent me a rewiringamerica.org link,
Okay.
which is just like a really interesting, very clear snapshot of kind of what's in this and when and whether it's a tax credit or an upfront discount. I thought that was pretty helpful. I wanted to pass it on to the group.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I put a link into Solar Power World talking about some of that stuff too, so.
Mhm. Yeah, the last thing I saw here that was significant, energy efficiency money, and they're giving a $1,200 credit for upgrading of appliances and other energy efficiency programs, as well as $150 credit per year for energy audits. This is at the residential level. And it was a little unclear, but I tried to research it. If homes meet the Energy Star single family new homes program, then they'll qualify for somewhere between 2,500 and 5,000 in credits. And it appears to me that this is for new homes only, and it's something that the builder sort of goes through to get their construction certified through this Energy Star program. They have to demonstrate 20% energy savings above averages. So just for making energy efficient homes. So now, in summary on all of this, they claim that the tax, the savings on medical will generate about 739 billion. The costs for the renewable energy programs will be about 369 billion. The cost for the extension of the Obamacare subsidies will be 64 billion, which will net 300 billion, which goes towards the reduction of the deficit, which hence we get the name, the Inflation Reduction Act. Although every single financial article I read about this says that will have zero impact on inflation. But if that's what they need to call it to get it passed, great. You know, I'm all for it, because I think it's really going to be impactful to the solar industry. Not something I could justify, you know, when I rant against the fossil fuel industry about getting subsidies. But I'm happy about it. I'm willing to be hypocritical about this. We'll take ours for the next 10 years, and then I'm sure they'll beat us around the head and shoulders after that. So any comments on any of that or all of that, or any insight on what this is going to mean to the industry? Yeah, Eric, you got a comment?
I have a question. Are the incentives going to include other equipment that is electric, such as a tractor to run a farm, that type of thing?
That I don't know. Whether it would fall under electric vehicle for a tractor, might be. No, I didn't see any analyzation there. It felt like, in reading through, when they looked at the equipment, they were pretty broad when they talked about controllers and microgrid and interconnection equipment to connect in. So it seems like if you can justify that this is part of your renewable energy system, that could not have a purpose other than that, it would qualify. But again, that's when you get into specifics on the weird stuff. I don't know. Are you going to go buy an electric tractor? Do they even? I guess they make them. I don't know.
They do.
John Deere makes one.
Yeah.
Gravely actually makes a zero turn that'll run for 12 hours. So State Parks is looking at that. They're actually going to demo it here in the fall. And I also hooked them up with Selectrac, which is a company out of California initially. It's basically a utility tractor, front end loader. It is all electric. And so price-wise, they're pretty close to like a Kubota or Minn Kota anyhow. So why not go electric if you already have the system?
Yeah, that'd be great. And of course, noise reduction would be a big deal, you know, on all of that stuff. So, yep. Anything else? Anybody else have anything?
Well, speaking about farm tractors, what about the Department of Agriculture stuff that they're doing for solar? Is that gonna change any also?
I haven't heard of any changes. The main one, of course, is the REAP grants for businesses, rural businesses.
Yeah.
And that still remains at 25% for the grants.
Okay.
That's through the farm bill, and those farm bills are usually 5-year
Okay.
bills. So I'm not really sure when that ends. Oh, Dennis just said electric motorcycles do not qualify according to some industry articles. So that'll, yeah, and the REAP is 25% for agricultural businesses or businesses located in rural areas, and rural areas are considered areas with less than 50,000 population within, I guess, its governmental jurisdiction. So I know if it's in a city less than 50, it qualifies. I've never run into, if it's in the county, even if there's 50,000 or more in the county, it still qualifies as long as it's not in a city. So yeah, that's a big deal for folks, you know, getting 25% off the top. And there was, of course, those ITC. I guess when I was looking at this article, I didn't dig deep enough because they were talking about increasing that investment tax credit if you use domestically manufactured products. I think if I recall, it was another 10%. And then if you're putting it in an economically disadvantaged region, that can be another 10%. So you might be looking at 50% tax credit and 25% REAP grant. And then you're basically paying 25% of the cost for something that's already cheap. You know, I know when I do the evaluations, we come back usually 3.5 to 4 years payback period for REAP grant recipients, you know, when they're installing a system. That's not batteries included. Sounds like a Christmas toy commercial. Batteries are not included, right? Okay. Anybody else have any comments? I think we're in for an interesting decade coming up. So anyway, all right, well, no other comments, then I guess we'll see each other next week. All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks.